Amazing. Okay, so we're recording now. So I'd like to begin by asking, really, bringing it right back. Faith is a really common word, right? We've used it in the title to this, we've used it throughout this discussion already, but it's a word that's defined in many different ways. And what I'm really interested here is, what does that word mean to you? What does faith mean to you?
I think before I answer that from a personal perspective, the biggest and most integral support that all our faiths collectively have provided us, and in context of the pandemic specifically, has been a way for us to isolate every devastating and overwhelming statistic or news or atrocity that we faced. And in that sense, our faith has become a pillar of understanding, of wisdom, and of holistic support for all of us. You guys can jump in whenever you like, but I think to me, finding meaning in something is intrinsic in all of us, right? We're always searching for the reasoning or truth or answer behind a question. But what faith means is an understanding and constant reminder that we're to rely on our beliefs and, for me, God, not ourselves. So it relieves us of that burden of trying to be in control and provides that peace of mind for us that we were not created, at least for me, to have control, because everything that happens is in the hands of God. Yeah.
Thanks for that, man. And would anyone else like to come in as well on that question?
For me, faith is about how you interact with yourself and the world, because we're an organism from a biological, scientific standpoint. We're an organism, and we're living, we're breathing, we're interacting with the world through our senses, and it's how we interpret that. And whether it's you believe in a god or goddesses, it's the energy that we all have and how we interact with the world and what we take in and what we give out. And it's so important because even for communities around the world that don't have a faith and they go by a list of morals and codes and standards of human behavior, that in itself is kind of like a faith, because it's how you react to other people. It's like a way of being, and I think that's so important. And like you said, Iman, it's about that, finding that meaning in your purpose in the world. And it can be such a wonderful thing and a wonderful place to go to, a source of support.
For me, just to add to this, I think faith is something, it doesn't matter what you believe in. For some people, it might be God. For some people, it might be something else, a teacher, or, someone who inspired you. But I think, having faith is you really believe in that thing. And if that thing is helping you, it's able to make you happy, it's able to make you interact and live a respectful life, and being together with other people, I think, yeah, you try to hold on to this and try to get yourself better and better.
That's interesting. And whilst we've all defined faith in different ways, I mean, I think one of the key things that ties all that together is that it's so crucial to, or at least from hearing from you, it's so crucial to identity. It's so crucial to how you are within the world, right? How you see the world, and I suppose how the world in turn sees you. So, I mean, in that question, and perhaps this is a good my words. Perhaps now is a good time as well to, I suppose, introduce as well the different faith group or belief system that you yourself have. But the question is, faith has been a significant factor to many communities, right? I mean, I think we can look back through almost every society or civilization in the world and find something that could be defined as faith. So it's been a significant factor for many years. Do you feel understanding faith is crucial to understanding identity? Feel free to just jump in, right? I realize that's quite a weighted question, but yeah, perhaps if you start by, I suppose, explaining the different faith group or belief system that you yourself have, and then whether that understanding of faith is important to you to understanding identity.
Well, I grew up in quite a Christian household when I was younger, and there was aspects of it I loved. I thought it was great. Go to church, you get to see your friends and the community environment. it was wonderful. It was quite nice, but there was aspects of it, large aspects of it, I didn't connect with it. I didn't understand. I just thought that's unusual. Why did they do that? And I'm quite a researcher. I like to delve into things and why. I thought maybe it's just maybe I'm not connecting. I'm quite young. I'm not connecting, understanding. But I had all these natural abilities, plants, animals, understanding them, understanding that aspect of the world, putting things in categories and organizing them and seeing the evolution of things. And I thought, why is that? What is going on here? And understanding the kind of prehistoric artwork when it came to faiths, of the depictions of gods and goddesses and nature and where it came from, an early man. I thought, what is this? It's a strange pull and tie that I have. And I never had a label for it. Quite a few people thought that was weird. I never had a label for it. I did lots of research and I come up with these terms like nature, paganism, Wiccan, witch, heathen, and all this lot. And yeah, it had a lot of negative stereotypes. And I thought, something that's making me joyous and happy, something that's clearly an integral part of me, and it's never going away. When things are great, things are not so great, it's never going away. And I thought, I'm pagan. That's what I am. That's who I am. And I've always been that. And even seeing friends at Sunday school, going to church for weddings and funerals and christenings, it was always there. And it was just there alongside everything. And that has always been a part of my identity. There's nothing that could take that away. And I think for people that are not sure about describing it, go based on the feeling. Does it make you happy in a way that you're not hurting anybody? Does it make you happy where you can completely grill it, put it underneath a microscope and just analyze the heck out of it? And then I still love it. All its intricacies, all its different aspects of it and its themes. For me, faith and identity are just one in the same, and I love it. And I can look at it and relate to other people of different faiths. It's the most natural, comfortable thing in the world. And yeah, faith and identity, one in the same for me.
That's interesting.
I think I echo what Phoenix said. I really resonate with that too. So I'm a Muslim woman by faith, if hijab didn't give it away already. But I think that is intrinsic in all of us, you know, when our faith feels comfortable enough to be outspoken, either in our external character or within our actions, and that becomes our identity. And I think for me, what made sense to me for it to be my identity was that when I am performing my practice in Islam, or when I am speaking to other people, I see my actions and my reactions to them rooting from my learning of Islam. So whether that be patience or gratitude or the respect I give to other people, I don't see that as something that I've learned from my parents or from something that I've just picked up. It's something that's rooted in the teachings of Islam. And so I see myself as representing my religion wherever or whoever I may be with.
Yeah, so me, I am from the Baha'i faith. So I grown up, in the Baha'i faith. But when you're born, you don't actually born as a Baha'i. So it's only when you are age of 15, then you can do some investigation yourself, and then if you're happy to become a Baha'i, then you can choose to become a Baha'i. Um, but that doesn't mean if you don't participate or practice any Baha'i activities or events we do. So from a young age, I've been participating and grew up in a Baha'i family. But it's not until when I was youth, really around age of 18, 20, which I really investigate the faith, get to know a bit more about the faith and decide myself and wanted to become a Baha'i. But no, since then, I think I've been very faithful to my faith and follow all the rules or like I need to follow to be as a good Baha'i as I can be. Yeah.
And so you've all mentioned, your different faith group, and what's became really clear to me as well, and indeed, when we're planning tonight's conversation, we would hope this would be the case, but is each of your different faith groups have faced some degree of marginalization. Even, for example, if when we talk about faith, when we talk about religion, which is another word which obviously is closely related, often certain faith groups are missed out or they're marginalized within that space, especially when we talk about the UK and, I suppose more acutely in Scotland, we are, by and large, when you go to school, you get taught about Christianity, you have assemblies where you pray, you pray to a Christian God, there's a lot of Christianity that's very much made its way into the structures and institutions that are so commonplace within our everyday lives in the UK. And so I'm interested to hear, when we talk about faith groups and when we talk about, I suppose by extension, religions, and explicitly within interfaith conversations, do you feel that your community is marginalized or your faith group is marginalized? And I suppose what impact, if you do feel that way, what impact does that marginalization have on you as an individual? Feel free to just jump in. Yeah.
Is that marginalization specific to Scotland or internationally?
Yeah, internationally we can speak, yeah.
Okay, so I think in terms of Scotland, I lived in Scotland for, I think, 8 years now. And since I've been here, I have truly felt a compassion and care towards the Muslim community and within the Muslim community themselves. And I think I'm really thankful to Scotland for that, because I see it as a very open community in terms of acceptance and in terms of respect to all faiths, non-faiths, anyone. I think what has been central to that comfort that I felt is having open spaces. So although I may have only learned a small degree of Islam within my school, because the majority of it would have been different religions, and I've not been exposed to it in terms of my education, something that has been central to my faith has been the mosque, which is a central part of our communal faith. And in Islam, the mosque points to a human need for connection, because we feel that it goes towards emotional and mental wellness, to be able to share your faith with other people who share the same degree of beliefs and maybe even marginalizations and insecurities with that faith too. I think that's really helped me feel comfortable and confident, and also feel a certain degree of peace when it comes to the marginalization we face internationally. Take the Uyghur genocide against Muslims that's happening currently, the genocide against Rohingya people in Myanmar, Muslims in India, even in Europe, France and Belgium, the bans against the physical covering of the niqab. I think all of that points to the belittling and discrimination and suppression of our faith in the name of secularism and liberalism. And although obviously that's very painful, not even painful to just Muslims, but I think all people of faith, because they see how painful that could be if that was to happen to them, and it is happening to many faiths too. I think in terms of the impact that has on me, it saddens me and the whole community deeply. But I think what uplifts us is the teachings of Islam. We believe that we will be tested in this world. But if we hold steadfast to the tenets of patience and gratitude, then we will be content. Not to mean that I'm going to be cheery, but I will have inner contentment and inner peace that whatever is happening, God is in control. And as long as we are patient, then we will be rewarded for that. So yeah, that's how I got.
Thanks for that, Iman. I think that's, yeah, and I completely agree with you. And I think it's so important that you did bring in those international examples of the horrible, horrible events that are continuing to happen throughout the world. Thank you for that, Iman. Umesh, Phoenix, do you feel the same way around your respective faith groups as well in marginalization?
Being a pagan person of color, a Black person that is a pagan, it's quite an kind of intersectional aspect, because when people think of pagans and going down to the denominations of whether you're a heathen, whether you want to be classed as a pagan but not go into denomination, or you're a Wiccan or you're a witch and so on, you don't see on the surface of it a person of color. And it's quite interesting because if you go back to the roots, my heritage is Caribbean and African, and before Christianity ever hit the Caribbean shores, it was a pagan community. We had Taino tribes, they believed in many gods, they believed in nature, they worked with nature for their communities, for their families, they interacted with different tribes, they bartered and sold. It was that kind of community. In many African countries, we had multiple religions there living side by side, coexisting. We had Islam, we had Judaism, way before Christianity came into the picture, and we had different pagan traditions being worshipped. And it was a kind of fruitful, flourishing place. And then, unfortunately, slavery increased, colonialization happened, Christianity became the dominant religion, and that changed everything completely. And it saddens me that today, when I say I'm a pagan to quite a few people, they go, "What? What's that? What is that?" Or they try and label it and say, "Yeah, okay, but you're a pagan, but you've been to church in the past." Like, yeah, that's just happened with the family I was in. And then you get people saying, "Well, you can't be a pagan because you're black." They assume that most people that look like me are Christian or they're a Muslim. And you need to know more about the world. You need to know about a lot about the history of the world and cultures and religions, because it's so wonderful and fascinating. So sometimes it does make me upset when people assume that, and especially over the pandemic period, there have been a couple of threats to pagan groups. People have been writing things in newspapers and magazines about how pagans are the cause of the coronavirus because we're sinful. There are some gangs that have threatened to kill people who identify as pagan at home and abroad. And it saddens me because a lot of the religions that are quite dominant today have elements of paganism in it. The use of herbs, candles, incense, some of the terminology that's used as well. Just simply blowing out candles for a birthday cake. That, in a sense, that's not a thing that was common in many religions before. Just simple things like that, understanding nature and the world and seeing the cycles of life and the seasons of life. Those things are pagan teachings. Those are pagan lessons. And then to have people say they would like to kill us, that you're not who you are because of the color of your skin. We're going to take certain words and aspects and rename it in our own way because of colonialism, because we feel uncomfortable. We're going to call something sinful because we just don't want to address the origins. That it does sadden me. But then I think, you know what? They're entitled to their beliefs, but there's so much out there for them to learn. And I don't necessarily have to teach them straight away. I can put them in the right direction, but it's their choice, and that's the magic of free will. I was talking to someone, I said to them, you can see a fox attacking a bunny rabbit, for instance, in the wild, and all you see is that's horrific act. But you don't see the fox's cubs in the den. You don't see why that fox killed that bunny rabbit to feed the family. And that's truth, that's life, and I think that's religion. There's going to be some aspects of it people will not like, and they won't understand, and they won't get it, and that's fine. But there's also some joyful, wonderful parts of faith and religion, and it's having that balance and that harmony. And I think that's what gets me through dark times.
Thanks for that, Phoenix. I think that was, really interesting. And you touched on something that I want to return to, actually, and that's the whitewashing of faith. So we will return to that as well. Umesh, I don't know if you want to come in on this as well.
Yeah, maybe just add a bit. So I think first thing is to realize how lucky we are in Scotland. I think being able to have different cultures, different faith working together, and it's really service to humanity. One of the events I remember where we were serving food, for example, the homeless. So we have different community coming together and do that. It's so amazing. And we're really lucky in that way, because I think if you look around the world, there's probably no many places who are really working, being in the harmony together, do things. So yeah, and myself, I come from an island, Mauritius, and we've always been having this multicultural working together. And when I came to Aberdeen, at first it was difficult, but when I start you know, meeting more and more people, different culture, different faith, and I tend to realize it's actually um, a nice place to be, and yeah, I've been here quite a long time now, and I quite like quite in general. And I think in the Baha'i faith, we believe there's one God, religion is one, and humanity is one. So I think being able to work with different faiths, different culture, different people, I think it's really help us, to work together.
Thanks for that, Amish. And I suppose it returns as well to the point that Iman made around human need for connection as well, and that's something certainly we'll return to. I mean, something that perhaps now is a good point to bring it up, that Phoenix touched on was the whitewashing of faith, and I suppose by extension, the whitewashing of religion. Now, I was brought up, I'm a Scottish traveller. I was brought up by and large with Christian beliefs. A lot of my community are evangelical Christians. So one of the images, and I suppose it's a good example of this, but one of the images when I think about faith, when I think about religion, is the image of Jesus. And Jesus is always white, right? He's always white in paintings. He's always white in books. He's white in, if there's ever a depiction of Jesus, he tends to be white. And I'm aware of this growing conversation around the depiction of people who are significant within faiths, but more importantly, just faith in general, and how oftentimes it's been whitewashed. And it's something that I think is really important that we discuss and that we bring out into the open, and we actually we critique it and we think about that and whether that impacts on communities, and what that impact is, and I suppose what the legacy of whitewashing faith contributes to, and how that happens. So we hear about this whitewashing of faith, and I'm interested to hear whether you believe that there has been a whitewashing of faith, and whether it does link into elements like colonialism and other important events in history, but importantly, whether it impacts on you and your faith group.
I grew up seeing in TV shows and films witches and Wiccans and pagans and druids of different forms, and majority of the time they were white. And it was a really weird kind of thing. Kind of, I'm pagan. Where's the me that I feel and believe? Where is the me in this? What I'm seeing? I thought this is really odd. I thought, well, they're in the books that I read. They're in the articles, the scholarly articles. They're in the artwork that I see, that I study, but they're not on screen. This is such an odd thing. Most religions have a mystical aspect of it, and holy individuals that are of darker skin tones. Where is that? I don't see it. And if I do see it, it's stereotypical. You see a laughing Buddha, just a jolly kind of fat man with, dark skin, but that's about it when it comes to mystical aspects of it. And it saddened me that it took me quite a few years to see people of color that are portrayed as black or brown and indigenous. And it saddens me that the whitewashing of spirituality has taken on a life of its own. And then when you call it out, most of the time, from my personal experience, oh, it's not that bad, it's no big deal. Do you not realize a lot of the holidays you have are pagan? Easter, that's not what it's not always about, chocolate bunnies and Easter eggs. That was about paganism beforehand. That was about the changing of the seasons and celebrating it. And then adding on to the Jewish aspects of it, it's an interpretation of Passover. So for people to say, it's not a big deal, it's okay. Yes, I know we need more representation. I get that, it's no big deal. But when you deny the origins of festivals, when you deny traditions, when you deny a person's identity to be seen on TV, in the media, that causes a lack of knowledge to be shared. A lack of knowledge not being shared means you become ignorant. When you become ignorant, you do negative things, unhealthy and unbalanced things. Self-hatred can come in, stereotypes and prejudice against different people of all ethnicities and races these things happen. Now, if you have a range of knowledge, that's great, and you can pick and choose what you want. You have every right to do that. That's free will. But when you don't have that's a problem. Now we're starting to see people of color, indigenous individuals, being represented as pagans, as witches, as Wiccans, from TV shows, through to films on screen. And I'm proud and I'm happy, but there's a long way to go.
I think from what Phoenix says, I want to touch on the prejudice and propaganda side of this. I think we're all familiar with how Islam and Muslims as a group are stereotyped and used as a propaganda tool to incite different levels of discrimination upon Muslims themselves in different countries. And I think that has been an impact or has been spearheaded by the war on terror and the happenings of 9/11. And I think growing up in that era, for me, I think I was about 3 or 4 years old at that time. So something that I never actually developed a conscious of until I was maybe in my teenage years. And I think watching my dad with a full beard being questioned every time we go to the airport, or seeing myself be questioned the first time I wore hijab and went to the airport and be taken out of the line just to be asked why I'm going to visit my grandma. I think it was very embarrassing and it was very demeaning. And I think that's where the propaganda comes in. It is a tool that is used to demean a group of people that are already a minority, but to make them almost a terror or almost people that you should be scared of. And I think in that element, what's incited is a hatred and a fear of that group. And what that stems from is just taking that group, taking them out of a majority community in which they are providing their own efforts and time, in which they are using their own selves for good, and taking them out and making them a criminal. So I want to discuss that because I think that's something that people are still just dressing over. They're not addressing that and addressing the impact it has on those people. Specifically internationally, I mean, we've seen propaganda turn into genocide, right? And the most clearest example is of China right now that I can think of. People are literally in concentration camps because of their faith, because they are Muslim, because people have been hearing them read the Quran or see them pray or say salam, which is just a peace offering to another Muslim. And I think that is a level that every propaganda may reach at one certain point, and we shouldn't just gloss over the depiction of a Muslim man with a beard and think of him immediately as a terrorist. Or we shouldn't gloss over the fact that whenever any attack happens and a bomb is used, we immediately go, oh, it would have been a Muslim. If a Quran has been found, it has to be a Muslim. And I think those are mindsets that we need to actually reflect on and analyze and unlearn them. This is for everyone, even for Muslims. And it's something very important that we need to do immediately. Otherwise, this will turn into a universal fear and hatred of a group that is nothing criminal.
Mm-hmm. It's a really important point, Iman, and something that I'll definitely return to as well around that unlearning, right? I think that's something that's really, really important. Umesh, do you want to comment on this as well?
No much to add there, really, other than, I think prejudice, I think, has been one of the big thing, especially lately. And I think it's not until we really realize we are one, I think this will still be a problem. So I don't know when, but I'm sure it will happen one day. Humanity will realize we are eventually one, and hopefully we will be living in a better place.
Definitely. No, I think that's something that's such a massive ambition, and I certainly share that with you, Umesh, as well, and hopefully one day that will be the case. I suppose that ties very well into this point then. I mean, Iman talked about, the unlearning and the fact that society at large, really need to learn or unlearn some of these institutionalized prejudices, these institutionalized stereotypes and beliefs, I suppose, that we've been brought up with, perhaps, talking about Western, majority of Western countries, if I'm honest, after 9/11, which you spoke about, there was that, when you look at the media, for example, Islamophobia was rife within the media after that event. And I know, obviously, there's been other events recently as well that the media have again jumped on. So I suppose what I would ask is, and again, everyone feel free to answer this, but where we have these types of beliefs being propagated within our society, or marginalizations being propagated within society, how can the individual themselves take action to make sure that they are challenging, for example, what they're hearing, or how can the individual make sure that they are helping to change things into a positive direction rather than continuing to propagate the same tropes about communities and faith groups?
I was talking to a friend yesterday about a football association board member who said some interesting things, ignorant, outdated things, he said, questioning why sportsmen and women, they don't talk about the intersexual aspects of their personality, whether it's a black footballer who comes out as gay, or women not getting equal rights when it comes to playing sports and so on. And they said that they thought it maybe a step too far that they were sacked. And I said, well, I can see why you might think that, but I think maybe one of the reasons why they did that and took that step, because if you let it get out of hand, people can die. If you let it get out of hand, people can suffer, not have housing, not have jobs, not feel comfortable within themselves. Within Black, Brown, Indigenous communities, we have so much stress on a day-to-day basis, whether it's wearing a hijab, whether it's just colorism, just trying to feed our families. When you let words just run wild, hurtful, ignorant, painful words, and people don't know the origins of those words, it can really cause a lot of damage. You need to know why things are the way they are. Now, if you worry about being called an ignorant, or you worry about being called a racist or prejudiced, I get that. Heck, even me as an ethnic minority, even with me, if someone knows of a different ethnicity or of a different religion, my first port of call and say, hey, I saw something on TV. I know so and so who eats similar food to what you eat. That's not my first port of call. It's, hi, how are you? Do you like the weather today? And if you happen to bring up faith, or if you happen to bring up your ethnicity, can I ask you a question about it? Humility, understanding, just being a nice person. If you're unsure and you don't want to be labeled as anything negative, just ask. Because when you don't ask, you don't know. And when you don't know, it can have a knock-on effect. There's been people out there, it's a weird increase over time, where people are taking the word gypsy and naming and using that word and having their businesses with that word in it, like a gypsy shop or a gypsy healer, or using words like gangster and hood magic to describe the kind of practices they have. But on the face of it all, it's someone who's white, that has no original heritage to a Roma or traveler community, has no heritage, of a Black or brown community within their family. And I'm thinking, that's really disrespectful. Why would you use it if you don't know it? But it's cool, it's in fashion, it's popular at the moment. When you're using that, you're taking away from those communities that deserve it. What was once private and personal and beautiful and honored is now tainted for money, because it's the common thing right now. That's a terrible, terrible thing to do. But just saying, well, I don't really know, I don't really care, it's no big deal. It is a big deal. And that's why sometimes people need to lose their jobs. That's why sometimes people need to make those apologies. We're all here to grow and learn. Nobody's perfect. We need balance and harmony. You try, you learn, and you grow.
Wise words, Phoenix. Yeah, and completely echo them as well. I think, the expression that you used there, taking something that was once private and personal and making it, almost commercialized. I think that's something that's really tangible, certainly in my own experience, and you can certainly see that around society today. That's a really important point. Iman, Umesh, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I think I echo what Phoenix said. It's a really difficult question, to be honest, because there's so many aspects of our knowledge that are rooted from ignorance, but we just never question them. And like Phoenix said, much of the knowledge I think that majority people have, maybe even we have, is from things like mass media or social media. And these are sources that should not be trusted. They may have been trusted once upon a time, but no longer, because much of these sources are tools of propaganda, or tools to incite mindsets that are very dangerous mindsets. I think what we can do on an individual level personally is to always question what we see. So be that someone being stereotyped, we have to question it. Maybe even a topic of history, we have to question it, because we know history itself has been whitewashed too. I think as an individual level, that is probably the first step, to question it. And then if you don't find an answer, seek knowledge. Be that, like Phoenix said, from asking questions to people that you know are knowledgeable, or to finding a trusted source. As a communal level, I think what we require is transnational justice at this point, because we know that within maybe even our own states or nations, the level of justice that is provided is no longer equitable for communities that have been suppressed for centuries now, especially in the UK. And I think from that, what we actually require is groups like yours, like community groups that are uniting people of different backgrounds and different knowledge levels even, and they are having these very necessary discussions in trying to dismantle the system of knowledge that we may have on a certain topic, and gather together the right facts and the right information that can be provided to a new community or new younger level of generations, so that we can, like you said, unlearn this knowledge that we have come to grow up with, and to then provide a new and truthful source, a platform to people who may want to question this further.
Totally. Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with that as well. I think, that's something, you mentioned justice there. And again, that's quite a weighted word, but it's one that, it's really threading a backbone throughout a lot of the responses that we've had to these questions so far. And that's something that I will again return to. Umesh, would you like to come in on this question?
No, really anything to add to this. I totally agree.
No, that's all right. Yeah, no, totally. So the next question then was really about drawing on that notion of justice. And one of the things that Progress and Dialogue have been involved with in the past was restorative justice practice. I'm aware that everyone's been involved with that, but basically what it means in the most basic of terms is you bring the victim, usually of a hate crime, and that's certainly how we've engaged with the practice. You bring the victim and the offender together in a mediated conversation where the offender can really learn, for example, how their words that they've used, or how a certain hate speech, for example, has impacted on the victim. And it allows people to learn about how the victim has experienced things, or we wouldn't really use the word victim either, but again, that's a whole different discussion. But really it helps to build a society which understands people rather than just pushes people into, for example, prison, and then they come out with the exact same beliefs, if not worse beliefs. So it's certainly been quite a good practice for us in the past, and we've used it a number of times in supporting people who have experienced hate crimes, and making sure that those hate crimes don't then be repeated by the same individual in the future. Now, when we talk about faith groups and we talk about religion, or I suppose when media talks about faith groups and media talks about religion, they often involve discussions around conflict. So, Iman, you've already brought that up today, or tonight rather, around how Islam is portrayed often in the media. Phoenix, you've again brought up conflict as well. I think conflict has been present tonight in terms of, it has impacted on communities. But to flip that on its head, we also know that faith groups and religious groups are some of the most important practitioners of restorative justice practice. I mean, just one example, we could have Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who obviously has been massively influential in restorative justice practice and conflict resolution. So my question is, do you feel that faith communities and or leaders should be more involved in, for example, disputes around hate crime and conflict resolution around hate crime, or more broadly in restorative justice practice in, for example, war-torn regions as well.
I do believe faith communities and religious communities should really be not necessarily the forefront, but in balance with people that don't have a faith, because sometimes we get a skewed idea again in the media of, well, I'm kind of grew up in certain faith in my community. Let's say I grew up in an area that was a Roman Catholic, so yeah, I grew up with that. I don't really class myself as a Catholic. I don't really class myself as a Christian, and that's fine. That's okay, because you're allowed to express yourself and change and evolve and grow over time in your lifetime. So it's fine that you don't want to label it, but you should at least be involved with people who are different to you and the same as you, who you can relate to them, so you can understand where they're coming from. And when it happens, when there's a crime committed, you need to go by what the victim, or in some cases the survivor, is going through. Maybe it's not the right time for them personally to talk to the person who committed the crime. There's a big thing in paganism where it's about free will, and harm none, do what thou wilt. It's from the Wiccan Rede, and it's about, you can do whatever you want basically, but don't harm anyone. But that also means yourself. It's not just about, well, I suppose I better forgive and let live and move on, it's the right thing to do. What about you? What about your spirit and soul? I have faced racism, and I had to take that time to really give myself that space. And I'm so lucky and honored I'm able to do that in Scotland. I've got great family and friends that allowed me that space and that moment to cry, to be angry, to be sad, to be disappointed. And because I had that space and that time to just understand where I'm coming from, what I'm feeling, I was able to say, okay, I can talk to that person that caused me that hurt and pain. Actually, maybe I don't want to talk to them verbally. I can write a letter or an email. There's so many different ways that you can talk to someone that's abused you, talk to someone that's hurt you, talk to someone that's caused trauma. It could be by even making your own business, making your own organization. It could be by changing a job where you're more in a position of power to help people of your community. There are so many things you can do. It doesn't always have to be straight away and head on. It can be in a more relaxed way, and it can be just sitting down and having a cup of tea. There's so many ways. So I think, yes, it should be great that faith communities are on board and helping when it comes to restorative practices, but use non-traditional and traditional methods to do it. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Everybody's going through a variety of hurts and pains, but some people just don't know they've even caused that hurt and pain.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think in terms of the question about if community or faith leaders should be at the forefront of this, I definitely agree with that, because I think to a certain degree, if you have a leader of a certain group who, is renowned, everyone trusts their wisdom and knowledge, you trust them to a certain degree of the justice that they will also enact, and how they will not let go of injustice that has happened, be that a conversation where someone has been insulted because someone has insulted them in some way, or be that physical injustice of harm. I think what's important is that we should never let someone believe that what they have been hurt by is not a crime or is something that is invalid, because then that means that whatever that faith group is, they're not respecting anyone if they're not respecting someone who's been hurt, right? And I think in terms of that, restorative justice is very important, because as a faith leader, you need to show that not even just the rest of your group, but to a community as a whole, is that you are conscious of what's happening around you, and you are conscious of everyone being given equity and fair treatment. And if fair treatment means someone needs to be apologized to, or someone needs to be prosecuted on whatever level of the crime that they've committed, then that is necessary, because you're setting an example for not just the group, but you're representing the faith in general too. And if you're representing a faith, then you need to be fair in all of your actions.
Again, I kind of struggling because in the Baha'i faith we don't have a leader as such in the Baha'i faith. So I think it's been more on a individual or to a community level. But I totally agree. It's very important to be able to freely share, or have your opinion, or try to sort out any issues that have been arise within the community. And also we're very small community in Aberdeen, so yeah, not much to add really, but no, I really appreciate what you guys shared.
No, totally. And yeah, I agree with all those points. And I think that is something, when we talk about faith, and certainly in the line of work with progress and dialogue, talking about social change, broadly talking about tackling social injustice, often we are talking about cases, for example, the Uyghur genocide, and we're talking about things that are negative. And I think, I suppose, one of the things, or one of the reasons I asked that question was, how can we turn that into more of a positive? And I think when we talk about minority communities, or marginalized communities, often faith is a key bonding agent, to put it in one way. Or if you do have a leader within your faith, they are often a key leader or spokesperson, or as you put it, Iman, someone who's very trusted within the community. So certainly, no, that's interesting to hear your thoughts on whether that can be used better in restorative justice practice. So I suppose bringing our conversation on a little bit, moving into our last kind of section of tonight anyway, want to hear a little bit more about COVID-19, obviously. I mean, it's the elephant in the room, right? The pandemic that we're all living through, this plague that we're living through, and, hopefully we'll be out of it soon. But what religious or faith-based tenets, or perhaps commandments or rules, have helped you during this pandemic as an individual?
So overarchingly, as Muslims, I can break it down into, we have two tests in this life, and the first is a test of patience, and the second is of gratitude. So when faced with adversity, we remain patient and thankful to God, and when faced with ease, we don't forget the blessings and guidance of God. Both of these pillars fall directly into every aspect of life, and specifically what we have experienced during this pandemic. For me, where it has been painful and tiring and frustrating, dealing with the devastation that COVID has brought, and the tests that are a natural part of life that we have to accept. The Quran, which is our holy book, is symbolic of this lesson that with patience and gratitude comes ease. Specifically, there's a Quranic verse which says, with difficulty comes ease. That's not to say that after difficulty will come ease, but it means that even when experiencing adversities, you will feel ease if you hold steadfast to patience and gratitude to God. I want to share one verse which resonates with me, where Allah, which is the Arabic translation of God, he says, we shall test you with something of fear and hunger, some loss in goods, lives, and the fruits of your work. But give glad tidings to those who patiently persevere. Those when afflicted with calamity say, to Allah we belong and to Him is our return. They are those on whom descend blessings from their Lord and mercy. They are the ones who receive guidance. So to me here, Allah directly tells me that He will test me with loss in various aspects of life, but that if I remain steadfast in being patient, which is to not question, why is this happening to me? Why has it not happened to anyone else? That will allow me to focus on my gratitude of thanking Him for the countless blessings that He has given me, that my ignorance takes for granted and that my comparison to other people takes for granted. And this will allow me to be wholly content. Like I said before, it will allow me to have inner contentment and peace that whatever is happening is the blessing of Allah, and His constant mercy will always provide me with ease during my difficulties.
Thanks for sharing that, Iman. I'm really interested in that. And again, speaking as a non-Muslim person, I can certainly see how that would have filled you with hope. And even just listening to you say it there, it was really reassuring. even for a non-Muslim man. So I think that, no, thank you so much for sharing that, Iman.
For pagans, we always kind of turn to nature. Nature, I said to one of my friends a few years ago that nature is our church. It's where we go to breathe, to understand, to learn, to grow, and we can see our personal responsibility if we don't, let's say, take the chance to clean up the trash or the litter on beaches and in parks. It's horrible, it's disgusting, it's not great for the ecosystem, it's not great for the environment, and it impacts us as humans. So there's an aspect of a personal responsibility, and I was reminded that in Wicca, for example, there's a system of 8 paired virtues: honor and humility, power and compassion, strength and beauty, mirth and reverence. In Druidry, there's the 9 virtues: wisdom and piety, vision, courage and integrity, perseverance, hospitality, moderation and fertility. And other pagan denominations, they have their ideas of virtues, and they always go hand in hand. They're always paired. They never, you've got to be really pious, but you can't be proud of who you are. You know, there's this aspect of, even when things are bad, there's always something good out of it. I was thinking that during this pandemic, it's a scary time for everybody. You know, whether you're not seeing your family and friends, you worry about your own personal health, you know, the bills. But do you know how many people have come together now online? Do you know how many people now are actually giving out food parcels to people? Heck, I'm receiving them, I'm giving them out. I may be able to be more humble, more open-minded. You know, they say we have 2 ears and 2 eyes for a reason: to observe, to listen more to the people. We've only got 1 mouth, because you're not supposed to talk as much, you're supposed to listen and observe more. And I take that from nature, I take that from the paired virtues, that we can endure so many bad things, but there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. There's always something beautiful at the end of it. We will come out of this pandemic happier, more wiser, and more willing to work with each other, people that are the same as us and different as us. So many people now are on board for Black Lives Matter, for example. So many people now that, I didn't know that. I didn't know I was that ignorant. I didn't know that I was that prejudiced. I didn't know about these statistics. I didn't know about that. But now you do. People are now saying, for example, when it comes to using Native American iconography or Native American traditions such as sage and feathers and dream catchers, if you are not from that community and not from that faith, why are you using it? And even if you want to use it, ask, get that knowledge, get that support, get that understanding. Certain types of sage plants are endangered. You cannot just use any sage plant because you're feeling you're a little bit of a low mood and you heard somewhere that sage would be good to burn. That's not wise. That's not good for the plant, and that's disrespectful to Native American communities. So just something as simple as that is, we will learn. We've learned so much already out of this. We've learned, we are continuing to learn, and we'll learn some more after the pandemic is over.
Yeah, for me, I I don't think there's one commandments or rules that really help us. I think these commandments are and rules are here always for us to be guided to use. But I think in the Baha'i faith, the purpose of the Baha'i faith is unity. I think it's have helped us really make us actually more close together. And you think about it, the pandemic have prevent people from meeting, but as you guys said, we have used technology to become more close together, and people from all over the world. So we had devotionals, we have meetings, and we have include people from basically all around the world. So it's actually have opened up uh, new possibilities, really. And I think for us is really being connected to each other, to seeking who needs help, or even the simplest thing you could do, just maybe call someone, um, especially I think the elderly people who has been in more need during this time, and they were still in this pandemic, and there's so many simple things, simple act of service we could do for helping, um, keeping this connection, keeping in touch with people.
Totally. Yeah, that connectedness again, you wouldn't believe it, right? That there's so many similarities. Everyone obviously is from very different faith groups, faith beliefs. But again, so many common traits there, you know, connectedness coming back through there again. Talking, I suppose, about the pandemic and how it's, I suppose, impacted you and your faith group. And I suppose something that it might not be we might not automatically know this unless we're in that faith group or faith community. But how has the pandemic impacted your faith group or community, and perhaps in terms of how you practice your faith, or you know, you spoke there, Ramesh, around coming together with other people within the faith as well. How has the pandemic impacted?
So I think we used to, meet, often. All the activities we do is usually, well, in the Baha'i faith, there's three or four main core activities. One of them is devotional meeting, where you can go to someone's place and pray together. So that's not been a huge problem. Actually, we had more devotionals than any other time. So now everyone would like to, host a devotional on different days. So that's been not a problem. I think we've been affected with other activities like children classes or junior youth activities, where you would want to be more in a circle, in a group, doing things together, craft arts. So it's been ongoing. It's still on online. We managed to do some of them, but I think it's been less and less. It's more difficult to have these activities online. But other activities like birthday celebrations, the prophets, or any other big activities or holy days we used to have. So that's been affected. It's difficult to do this online, but yeah.
It's been difficult for quite a few pagans around the world. Um, we had Litha, which is summer solstice, where the Stonehenge landowners and the authorities had an online broadcast of the sun changing and moving through the stones. Absolutely beautiful. And we couldn't be there. We couldn't feel the sun on our skin, and it was a sad moment, but it was also a beautiful moment that so many people around the world were joining in. And I was looking through the comments, being a bit nosy, and I saw there's so many people there that said, I'm not a pagan, I'm not a witch, I'm not a druid, I don't really get all of this, but it's the light at the end of it all. We were able to see that with our technology and hardware. We were able to experience that moment in its weird alternative form, mind you, but we were all able to experience it, and they just appreciated it. And we as pagans, we loved it. We thought it was really fun and great. It's not the same as being there, we know that, but it was wonderful. And then the same with Lunesa, Lamas in August, and then Halloween. It's getting darker. Groups are asked to be smaller now. So if you have to meet up in a coven or a moot, that's not really possible, especially if people of the pagan community have to take care of people, they have ailments themselves. So that was really difficult and hard. On the upside, so many Halloween and Pagan New Year and Samhain events online. It was wonderful. Tarot card readings and meditations and chants. Oh, it was fantastic. I was researching like crazy because just look, have you heard of this? Have you heard of this? What is this? People they're saying, I know we're a bit kind of separated, but hey, talk to me about your reflections on the new year. What would you like to learn? What skills would you like to learn? People are now going into kind of the business of crystal healing and Reiki and tarot card reading that they would never have done before. But because of what's happening with the pandemic and their wages have either gone down or this time has made them reflect, I want to learn these new skills, these new pagan traditions, that they want to learn them and add that to their skills. Like, I want to do it. So it's like a pressure on a diamond. You can't get a diamond without pressure. You can't get this beautiful, fully reflective kind of this item without pressure. And people are rising to that challenge, and I'm so glad and relieved, and we've been helping each other, which is nice, and sharing things more, talking more about the different forms of cultural appropriation, and sharing ideas and knowledge on how we can adapt in this world with the pandemic, and healing herbs and foods. It's been great. It's been sad, but it's also been great.
Yeah, I think I completely relate to what you both have said. In that sense, faith has become more individualized, but also more communal, right? So I think in terms of an individual level, I think on reflection, I've been able to practice my faith with the same sentiment, if not more, having been in lockdown, and just having that time and even the effort to make space and make time for my prayers or for my own Islamic reflections. So practice for Muslims is in the form of, it's in different variety of forms, but the most predominant form is prayer, which we do 5 times a day, which is scheduled. And I think in terms of that, my prayer has become much more stronger in terms of my conscience and in terms of how I am communicating with God, because I'm physically locked down, right? So I'm in my house with my family, and our living room has now become our communal praying room. So with that, I think there is a level of unity and level of community that faith has brought in during the pandemic. And what you both were saying, the examples you were giving were absolutely beautiful, because I think that's what this pandemic has shown. It's within our own faiths, we can come together no matter what adversity. I mean, we are physically limited in our own spaces, but we are still uniting and still sharing and celebrating our own faiths together, but then also sharing our different faiths collectively. And I think that's something that faith itself has the power to do. It has the power to collectively empower other people.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and it all sounds very positive. And one of the things, of course, right, we all have the right to faith. We all have the right to practice our respective faiths and beliefs as well. You mentioned a lot, well, all of you actually mentioned digital inclusion. You mentioned the digital connectivity being a key strength in continuing your practice of your faith, but actually continuing to connect with others within your faith community as well. Do you feel that the government has done enough to, for example, communities who might be experiencing poverty or digital exclusion, or perhaps the elderly who have low digital literacy? This is just one example, of course, feel free to make your own, but do you feel that the government has done enough to support your faith during the pandemic?
I think I want to make clear in that scenario that in the scenario that we're in, or the experiences we're living right now, we expect governments to enact policies that are for the betterment of all our societies. And we understand that they have to impose limitations on various aspects of life, which can also impose indirectly limitations on people's practice, like faith, for reasons of safety for the wider community. Where that legitimate policy becomes illegitimate discrimination against a group, not just limited to a faith group, but any group, like you said, is where it becomes very detrimental. I want to say, in terms of Scottish government and its effort with the Muslim community specifically, I truly do commend the Scottish government for their efforts in upholding the respect of religious groups. I remember even back in March, there was a £300 million priority fund for communities, in which specifically Islamic educational and community-based programs were given funding to continue online during the lockdown, so that the period in Ramadan and the celebrations within Eid would not be a very sad time for all of us, because that is all centered around community. And even in July and May, when Eid took place, mosques were open so that we could have some sort of celebration, even though it was within restrictions. I think back to your point about certain groups being limited, that is a reality, and a very sad one that we faced, in terms of people not having access to technology, which is rife within Scotland, just individually, and within the UK as a whole too. I think that's where our governments have failed, and that's where it becomes almost insidious discrimination against certain groups who physically are barred, limited in their physical capacity because they can't go out of their houses, but also barred from interactions or any sorts of communal enhancements that they could have gained. I think what I want to mention is the extreme and insidious actions of the central UK government. Not only have they enacted policies within the pandemic that are clearly racist, anti-Black, anti-immigrant, anti-refugee, all amidst the pandemic, but I feel that there has been a certain level of discrimination against Muslims within England. Examples I can think of are where specific Islamic schools in poverty-ridden communities in London have remained closed and have been given no funding whatsoever to open online. And so students from the ages of 10 to 18 or 19 have gone without school for up to 2 months. Or even in the current lockdown in England currently, where Boris Johnson so proudly said that we're going to have the lockdown open or lifted just in time for Christmas. What happens then at the festivities of Eid, of Diwali, of the festivities that Phoenix and Umesh mentioned? I think these are things that we have to keep remembering and keep challenging, because although governments may have done what they could, they still have not done enough.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And again, like, you know, and I'm learning so much from this, but, you know, even mentioning that and how, you know, Boris Johnson and other leaders around the world have, you know, made that point, oh, it will be lifted for Christmas. Again, it's tied to such a Christian concept of important event. You know, you're right. I mean, Diwali, of course, we're in Diwali at the moment, you know, and many are struggling. I mean, Rishi Sunak, of course, came out and encouraged people to connect online, but of course not everyone can connect online. So no, I think you came out a really, really important point there. Phoenix, Umesh, would you like to come in on this as well?
It's been a bit of a hit and miss, I think, for the government as a whole, for the whole of the UK, especially the Scottish government. We had some good news where on the Scottish census of 2021, paganism will be recognised. So that's fantastic. We're really happy. That's wonderful. That's great. Taken a very, very long time for it to be recognised, considering that in Scotland it's very pagan for a long while before Christianity hit shores. So that's a triumph. It's a long time coming. But then we've had misinformation when it comes to natural green spaces, where we can go, where we can't go. Not only do you have to check where you're coming from, which parts of the country you're coming from and where you're going to, if you have to visit anybody, if you have to do any actual practices by the beach, in parks, green areas. They've limited the numbers, but we're hearing variety of like information. And it's like every week, sometimes even every day, you have to triple, double check. So if you've planned to go and have a ritual with your coven, which is probably had to be cut down in size anyway because of social distancing, and everybody's wearing masks, it makes it hard for chanting, for meditations. You know, you can't really touch each other's hands, and even if you wear gloves, there's so many things. I think that's not fair. It's so difficult. Yes, we did have an online viewing for Litha for summer solstice. That's great and that's wonderful. But we were told kind of last minute that nobody would be going. Well, first we were told we could, and then people did actually book tickets. Some of them did get refunded and said, actually, it's not actually happening. So many people were up in arms about it. And I thought, if you just play and straight to the point, Christianity is not the only religion in the UK. You know, there are other faith communities. Just let us know, talk to the leaders, not make an afterthought because we've picked up a fuss. Get on top of it. And then having the threats and having people say that pagan practices and traditions are sinful, and not talking to them and not saying we're a wonderful, inclusive nation and community and country. No, you just wait until it kicks up more. You wait until people die, and then you say, actually, yeah, we should talk to people. We should talk to the police so these threats don't happen. And then me, as a person of colour who happens to be a pagan with the Black Lives Matter, the actual handling of that is just terrible. And only when it comes up to the UK Black History Month, then they decide, oh, actually, we'll get more people in. We'll actually interview more people of colour now, especially Black people. And we'll talk about Black History Month. Black History Month all year, every year, all day, always happening. Pagans have been in and out of this country for centuries. We're all represented here in the UK. It's supposed to be a lovely, diverse place. Talk to us all. Don't leave people out. Don't make it an afterthought. Don't, in hindsight, we should have done this. When are you going to get it? And I think it's just throwing us a bit of a bone is not going to compensate for all the lack of knowledge and ignorance and the lack of forethought. Yeah.
just to add to this on a low level, I think we all, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when we heard so many stories about, shopping, for example, or people needed help, and I think it's been poorly handled at the beginning. It could have been a lot more on a individual basis, looking into people who really needed help, and try to give these people, prioritizing these people to get help. So I think it doesn't matter, which faith or which religion. I think all people in general have been suffered at the beginning, and a lot more could have been done, but I think that was missing.
Thanks for that, Mish. And yeah, I mean, all of this, again, I'm not, obviously I have my own faith and beliefs. I wouldn't put them to any specific denomination, if I'm honest, but this is all new to me as well. And hearing how it's been handled by the government is very interesting. And certainly I hope some of the civil servants do watch this, so that they are aware on how that can be better handled. And ultimately how they can better engage communities around how restrictions impact on them, And we're coming to the end, but one of the last questions I'd like to ask and we've spoke around how your faith has helped you through the pandemic. I suppose to turn that on its head, and to ask, has your faith wavered in any way throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, I think it's natural for our faith to waver, especially during times of adversity like this. As humans, we just are impatient and we want things that might be affecting us negatively to end. And yeah, I think it's a natural inclination to maybe have drops in your effort or drops in your consciousness of God, however you believe in. But especially during this time, I think faith is also a pillar of huge support, like we were talking about previously. I think I've seen the pillars and the tenets of my religion materialize in front of me during this time, because it is during this time where you rely on things like your faith. And I think it's honestly been a huge moment of realization for me, where I've realized that certain lessons that you've been learning all your life about your religion, or things that you've been trying to learn in terms of mindsets which you should adopt in your religion, but you haven't been able to. They naturally just adopt themselves within times where you are suffering to a certain level, or where we are in pain or seeing devastation all around us. So although faith may waver, I think it also has its own way of just coming back up again.
Thanks, Iman. And Phoenix and Mesh, have you felt your faith wavering in any way?
At the start of the pandemic, I started a new job, and then we had to adapt very quickly. Then a member of my family was ill due to the virus. Another member of my family went missing. Then I got backlash from doing a podcast about racism that I faced in my previous job. It's been a very stressful time. And if I didn't have my faith, I don't know where I would be. If I didn't have trusted individuals that know me inside out as much as I know myself, I don't know where I would be. Yes, I saw some cracks, places where I'm like, okay, we need to tighten this up. We need to really fortify your foundations of who you are as a person, because you don't know what life is going to throw at you. And it's been such a wonderful blessing to celebrate in its really alternative form online, the pagan holidays, from Halloween to Lammas Litha, and luckily it's weird. It's kind of weird that it's the harvest festivals. We're all kind of looking at how much we have, what we're spending, the food we have, Are we able to give out resources to people? And so for the harvest festivals, for us, it is Luneza, which is in August, and Maybon, and then Halloween. So those are the 3 harvest festivals, and it's a time of reflection, understanding, celebrating with your communities, but also what do you have? How can you prepare for the future? How can you prepare for the dark winter months? And I think it's really ironic because as many pagans do, we look at the relationships with the world and connecting. Nothing's ever out no reason. You may not understand the reason straight away, but there's always a reason for something. I thought, why are we all going through this now in the time of such reflection on the harvest seasons? Why are we going through this now when we're all thinking about, Christmas and winter and Diwali? These festivals are light and now starting to crop up, and they're bringing us joy. We're hugging our families so much more. We're reaching out to our communities, leaning on each other so much more. We're saying, okay, what we did a few months ago is no longer viable for what we're doing now. So we're adapting and we're learning and we're growing. It was difficult and it was hard personally for me because I had so many stresses. I am so grateful and glad that I'm alive today. I'm so grateful and glad that there's people I can reach on, people that I can trust, people that can say, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to not do anything and just have that inactive moment of breathing, growing, eating that traditional food, singing that special religious song. You can do it. We can all do it. We've got this.
Yeah, for me, at the beginning of the pandemic, okay, we were all have to adapt to this new ways of doing things, new style of life, or you know communicating or meeting virtually. So we are a small community, especially in Aberdeen, but we are as one family. And when things change, able to meet, and of course it's difficult to make everything more difficult, and especially for the youth, I think, who really have love, energy, like to go do things together, and all these has been stopped or cannot be done. So in that way, yeah, I think we've been limited to what we can do. Myself, I was visiting some elderly people who cannot, like leave the home. So I was not able to do this kind of thing. So it's yeah. So it's really affect not even me, but I think as a community as well, because everybody is relying on you sometimes to give some a bit okay, how this person doing, how this one doing. So you miss a bit of this. So I think in that way we've been affected.
Definitely. No, thank you for that, Umesh. And I've still got 2 more questions I really want to ask everyone. So the second last question is, how do you think your faith, and we've already started to talk about that in Phoenix, you start to speak about the festivals, obviously, and how it's, I suppose the pandemic is bringing people closer together as well, but how do you think your faith will enable you or support or help you to deal better or perhaps be more supported with the aftermath of the pandemic? And you may not have thought, that far ahead yet, but, reflecting on your faith and reflecting on what that means to you and your identity, how do you think that will support, or do you think that will support you rather, in the aftermath of the pandemic?
I think for me, being a pagan and a person of color, with such tension, there's been a lot of tension this year. Uh, that's kind of propped up because of the pandemic, but also directly because of the pandemic, people losing their jobs, people worried about their finances, and people unfortunately dying, and people having long-term sickness. I have a friend that's dealing with a long-term sickness that's linked to the pandemic, and how that's affected her and what she's going through, her journey. It's quite interesting to see people's strength. I am now wiser and stronger because I've been through this. Seeing how people have reacted to me when I spoke up about racism, seeing how people have reacted, taken on board, but also taken a back seat when it came to the reactions of the Black Lives Matter, seeing people adapt and react to celebrating their festivals in different faith groups, it's filled me with pride, strength, and confidence that we can do this. We can really do this. You know, as humans, as people taking care of the planet and the environment, we can really do this. Yes, there's so much negativity in the world, but there's also a lot of positivity. And if we always concentrate on the negativity, we're not going to get anything done. And it's not healthy either to just focus on the positivity, because you can't fight for justice. You can't make this world a better place if you think everything is great and you've got your rose-tinted glasses on. So I think for me personally, I am stronger. I am more at peace, and I'm more confident to talk to people within my community and have those uncomfortable conversations and just ask. And I'm more just proud of the variety of faith communities that are getting out there in their hands, risking their own lives, but also being brave to say, I don't have all the answers, but I want to help you. That's just wonderful.
Yeah, I think I really resonate with that as well, because I think I've learned is my faith has solidified in this time. I've gone back to the foundations of my religion, and I've almost reinstated them into my heart. And I think what I've learned is that this world truly is fleeting. We don't know where we're going to be and who we're going to lose. And that statement isn't to make us all sad, but it's to allow us to acknowledge that the fact of this life is that our days are numbered, right? We're not going to be here infinitely. And so what we can do through our own faith, if that is, then we can use our faith. And personally, I can follow the tenets of the Quran and of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and I can use the characteristics and lessons that we've learned from their own adversities, and hold them in our hands and try to do as much good as possible within this world. I think it's a classic statement that we always hear, be as compassionate as you can and do as much good as you can, because you don't know how long we're going to be here for. But I think the pandemic has truly solidified that lesson into us, because we really don't know how long we're going to be here for, Sorry to depress anyone.
It's it's real. It's very real. Sorry, Umesh, did you want to come in there? I saw you.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think, this pandemic, I think, have made every one of us more stronger. I think, going forward, we always need to have the belief that, if we're going through a rough time, and I think there's a lot of positive it has bring already, but I think there will be a, lot of positives to come. I think this is the belief we have in our faith in God, that there is more greener to come. So hopefully it is soon. But I think also it's a, realization for people to change, uh, and I think a lot of people have already changed, the way of doing things, or at least something in their daily life. Um, Unfortunately for some, okay, it's just a bad time. It's past and nothing's changed. But I'm hoping that, yeah, in going forward, people will be more conscious. People will do things differently, make some positive change, and so this can, benefit not only our locally or the faith, or have an impact on the whole world, really.
Thanks so much, Umesh. Um, there's certainly a lot of words there for hope, as well as deep reflection. The very last question I'd like to ask everyone before we finalise tonight's conversation. Very quick question, but one that I think may be quite one of the difficult ones. Let's say tonight, is how would you sum up in one word or in one statement what your faith means to you as an individual, or to your identity as well?
For me, it's how to be oneness.
Thanks, Sumesh.
I'm really not sure if I can pick one word, but I think Umesh's word really resonates with me. It is unity, yeah.
I wasn't quite sure either. I had a phrase in my head. I was like, you can't use a phrase, it's got to be a word. Being, just being. And whether that's stillness or actively, just being.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for giving your time tonight. I learned so much, and I'm sure everyone else watching this will have learned a lot as well. I think one of the key things that have came out to me tonight is, despite all of our community champions tonight coming from very, very different backgrounds, different faith groups, there's still that similarity, that boundedness of connection and of community. And I think those two words are more important now than ever.